So we have Israel and Joseph and the other sons of Israel dwelling in Egypt now. This is going to be the new normal for a period of time. Of course, Joseph also made a promise to his father that he would not bury him in Egypt. Genesis 48 and 1. Sometime after these things occurred, someone told Joseph, "Behold, your father is sick." And he took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, and went to Goshen. As we recall, Joseph is kind of running Egypt, so he's kind of in a different area than the rest of the Israelites. So the messenger came to him, and he took his two sons with him, and they went to go see the old man. Genesis 48 and 2. When Jacob was told, "Your son Joseph has come to you," Israel collected his strength and sat up on the bed. Here we have Jacob sitting up in bed. Jacob is a very old man. He was incredibly old when they got down to Egypt, and now they've kind of been down there for a while. He sends for his son due to his failing health. And he puts kind of one of his last little bouts of strength. This is probably his work for the day here, sitting up, so that he can be seen sitting rather than laying down. Being caught laying down is very shameful. You really don't want to be looked at when you're laying down. It's kind of a sign of weakness, among other things. So he sat up, prepared for his son's visit. Genesis 48 and 3. And Jacob said to Joseph, "God Almighty appeared to me at Luz, Bethel, in the land of Canaan, and blessed me." 48 and 4. And said to me, "Behold, I will make you fruitful and multiply you, and I will make you a multitude of people, and will give this land to your descendants after you, as an everlasting possession." It was not that long ago, only a couple chapters, but in reality hundreds of years, we saw the covenant between Abraham and God. And then we saw the torch being passed down, saw this blessing being passed down to the next generation. It did not go to Ishmael, it went to Isaac. And then from Isaac, we saw Esau and Jacob, and it didn't go to Esau, it went to Jacob, the man who is sitting here right now. He's recounting the blessings that he received by God when he was on that journey, when he was leaving home, for his brother was going to slay him. He was on the run. Genesis 48 and 5. And now your two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to you in Egypt, are mine. I am adopting them, and now, as Reuben and Simeon, they shall be mine. Well, that's certainly very interesting. You always hear about these 12 lost tribes or the tribes of Israel and all that fun stuff. And, who are these tribes? And when they count out the tribes, how the numbers add up. So this is where we get some additional sons for Israel. And we'll see this kind of impact things down the road, but this is just kind of a beginning process. So the fathership owner privilege has been transferred from Joseph to Israel, so that they have gained a different position. A different position and a different standing. It's quite interesting, really. But the ramifications of this we won't see till much later. Genesis 48 and 6. But other sons who may be born after them shall be your own, and they shall be called after the name of these two brothers, and reckoned as belonging to them when they come into their inheritance. Very strange, very interesting dynamic here. But I guess any kids he has from now on will be of his own lineage. So it was only these two, and these two exclusively, that are having this adoption protocol implemented. Genesis 48 and 7. And as for me, when I came from Paddan, Rachel died at my side in the land of Canaan on the way, when yet there was a little way to come to Ephraim. And I buried her there on the way to Ephraim, that is Bethlehem. Almost wonder if it's like, Rachel, because she died after only having two sons, that it's like these two that were the firstborn of Joseph, that these would be treated as if they were the sons of Rachel, an extended thing or something. There's got to be something more to this that makes this more interesting. And we also got this aspect here with Bethlehem, and I mean that place kind of shows up later and is kind of significant. So there's something interesting about the way this is going on. It's like, because she died early and died in childbirth, that she wasn't able to have all the sons that she was supposed to have, and so here we have another form of surrogacy then. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of this, but it is certainly interesting, and it's got to be here for a reason. Genesis 48:8. When Israel, almost blind, saw Joseph's sons, he said, "Who are these?" Israel, he's old now. He's an old man. The sight is going from his eyes. Maybe it's cataracts. Maybe it's macular degeneration or whatever it is. He's really old. He's losing his sight. He's not able to see with the clarity of his younger years. So he has to ask, "Who are these?" Genesis 48:9. And Joseph said to his father, "They are my sons, whom God has given me in this place." And he said, "Bring them to me, I pray you, that I may bless them." Genesis 48:10. Now Israel's eyes were dim from age, so that he could not see. And Joseph brought them near to him, and he kissed and embraced them. 48:11. Israel said to Joseph, "I had not thought that I would see your face, but see, God has shown me your offspring also." When we think of the concept of see, we usually think of your eyeballs and the ocular sense of being able to see. But there's the other aspect of see, which is to experience, right? His eyesight is leaving him. He's not really able to see very well. And he never thought he would see his son again. But here he is. And here he is meeting the offspring of his son, his beloved son, Joseph. So this is just a wonderful experience. You may not have the ability, it's not high definition. It's not a 4K experience with HDR. It is the experiential seeing that he is able to experience his son and his grandsons, which he is now adopting in as if they were his own. So that's just kind of wonderful. Genesis 48:12. Then Joseph took the boys from his father's embrace, and he bowed before him with his face to the earth. So just picture this scene. We have this old man, this very elderly man who's not able to see very well anymore due to his old age and whatnot. And he's struggling just to sit up. But now he has the sons of his son, his grandkids before him, and he's hugging them and he's bowing his head down. This is probably one of the most joyous moments of his entire existence, his entire life, for he has been grieving for Joseph for decades. And here we go. Not only is Joseph returned, but his grandkids as well. Genesis 48:13. Then Joseph took the boys, Ephraim in his right hand towards Israel's left, and Manasseh with his left hand towards Israel's right, and brought them close to him. Genesis 48:14. And Israel reached out his right hand and laid it on the head of Ephraim, who was the younger, and his left hand on Manasseh's head, crossing his hands intentionally, for Manasseh was the firstborn. This is certainly very interesting and peculiar. So typically, culturally, whatever, the blessing goes to the firstborn son, right? Like, he's like kind of the inheritor or whatever. And we saw Jacob several chapters ago, about 100 years ago or whatever, taking the blessing of his older brother Esau. I mean, yeah, they're twins. They're kind of pretty much the same age, but he was technically younger. So he stole his blessing. So we got that thing going on, and here we are. We got these grandkids being led over by their father. Joseph's bringing his grandkids over to their grandpa, and he's putting his hand on their head to convey this blessing, and he crosses his arms so that his right hand is on the younger, which is very peculiar. And we got to remember too that this old man Jacob, he can't see very well. He doesn't know exactly what's going on. Maybe his mental faculties are diminishing slightly. I mean, he is old. I mean, not to be ageist or anything, but there's some sort of sense that is leading him to do this action with his arms, and then conveying the blessing to the younger instead of the older, similar to what it was in his past. But then we have this other thing that he's crossing his arms, making a cross with his arms. And of course, the cross, Jesus Christ, the symbol of the Messiah and the sacrifice. So there's probably some sort of prophecy going on here in the method that he's doing this blessing. And that's how a lot of the prophecies are in the Old Testament. They're very subtle, and it's like, looking back, it's like, oh, this is foreshadowing. This is what's going to happen down the road, a couple thousand years from now, right? And that's how a lot of them are. Some of the prophecies are certainly more direct and more obvious to the casual observer, but there's a lot of these little ones here that are much more subtle, that it's like you can pick up on them if you really study the text. But if you don't study the text, you don't really get that. You don't get to see the integrated system and the makeup of the Bible. So, here we are. He's just crossing his hands and blessing them. But is there more to that? Why is this here? Why is this significant, right? You need to be able to ask these questions to really see what is going on. Of course, we got to move on. Genesis 45 and 15. Then Jacob blessed Joseph and said, God himself, before whom my father Abraham and Isaac lived and walked habitually, God himself who had been my shepherd and had led and fed me from the time I came into being until this day. 48:16. The redeeming angel, that is, the angel, the Redeemer, not a created being, but the Lord himself, who has redeemed me continually from evil. Bless the lads, and let my name be perpetually in them. May they be worthy of having their names coupled with mine, and the names of my fathers, Abraham and Isaac, and let them become a magnitude in the midst of the earth. This is an incredible blessing that covers so many aspects, and it also shows a level of thanks that he has for the Lord God for delivering him up to this point in time. And he is so thankful, and he wants to bestow this blessing upon these two boys. What a wonderful scene. Genesis 48:17. When Joseph saw that his father had laid his right hand on Ephraim's head, it displeased him, and he held up his father's hand to move it to Manasseh's head. 48:18. And Joseph said, Not so, my father, for this is the firstborn. Put your right hand upon his head. Joseph is witnessing the blessing of his children. But something's not right. He's got the right hand on the wrong son. He needs to have the right hand on the firstborn to transfer the blessing, to bestow the blessing upon him. Joseph sees what's going on. He's like, hey, you got the wrong son there. But this is deliberate. He went out of his way to put his right hand on the second-born. He's got his arms crossed. That's not a natural way to extend your arms. You don't reach out in front of you and then cross your arms, right? Like, this is something that was deliberately done. And of course he's thinking, well, his dad can't see very well, and maybe he just made a mistake. But this wasn't a mistake. This was a deliberate act, the act of bestowing the blessing upon the second-born. Genesis 48:19. But his father refused and said, I know, my son, I know. He also shall become a people and shall be great. But his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his offspring shall become a multitude of nations. The thing that we don't really think about all the time when we're reading the Bible or studying the Bible, especially here in the Old Testament, is that this is history. These are events that have taken place, and we are reading the written record of the events. Not every detail is here for us to read. We don't necessarily know everything that was discussed with Jacob and the Lord when he was wrestling with him. They were wrestling till the morning. I'm sure they had quite the conversation in the midst of their wrestling event. And we don't know of other communications that occurred between them. So we don't really know everything that there is to know about Jacob and his history. We only have what is written in here. But I am of the belief that he had more communications with God that are not written down in the word here. So he had a greater insight into the future of his grandsons here, and he knew the future, for he was told by God that the younger son here was going to become a great and mighty nation. He knew that his descendants would take off and become greater than his older brother. And it also kind of mirrors the life of he himself. For Esau and Jacob, I mean, they had their little spat or whatever, and the younger was able to overcome the older and was able to gain the blessing that was destined for the firstborn. So we kind of have a repeat of that pattern here, and that's kind of interesting. Genesis 48 and 20. And he blessed them that day, saying, by you shall Israel bless one another, saying, may God make you like Ephraim and like Manasseh. And he set Ephraim before Manasseh. 48:21. And Israel said to Joseph, behold, I am about to die, but God will be with you and bring you again to the land of your fathers. 48:22. Moreover, I have given to you Joseph, one portion of Shechem, one mountain slope, more than any of your brethren, which I took, reclaiming it, out of the hand of the Amorites, with my sword and with my bow. How wonderful and how amazing. This is just incredible. So we have this idea of a distribution of blessings, that the sons of Israel will work together to achieve greatness, that there will be a blessing to one another. And that's just great, knowing that together they are stronger than they are individually. And then we have this other idea of Joseph receiving this portion of land, this one mountain slope. And then it has a second part here with the Amorites by the sword and bow, so that must mean that there was some sort of battle that took place in the past in which they were able to reclaim some of this land, and that this land will be kind of a inheritance to Joseph and I guess Joseph's descendants, other than his two sons, which are no longer his sons anymore. I guess they're almost like brothers, right? For they were adopted in by his father. So that's kind of interesting, right? So we got all this stuff that's kind of set up, and it's going to be for the descendants, and that they're not going to be able to enjoy it firsthand for themselves, for they're going to be dwelling in Egypt for quite a bit of time, actually. And there we have the end of another chapter.